Welcome back to the podcast. In this episode, we're talking about text editors. These are the tools that you use to improve the efficiency of application development. There's been quite a shift recently toward VS Code, and we've got some experts in to help us talk about this space. We've got Max Marcon, who is Senior Product Manager for Compass and Developer Tools at MongoDB, and we've got Joe Karlsson back. He's on the developer advocacy team here. So we spend a little time talking about the developer landscape, and we dive into the MongoDB extension for VS Code, which enables you to explore your MongoDB data right inside your editing environment. It was a great chat with Max and Joe and Nic, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the MongoDB Podcast.
MongoDB Podcast?
Exploring the world of software development, data, and all things MongoDB. And now your hosts, Michael Lynn and Nic Raboy.
Welcome. We are live, and we've got Max Marcon and Joe Karlsson, along with Nic and myself. And today we're going to be talking about the editor landscape, text editor landscape for developers in the year 2021. What are we looking at in terms of popularity? And let's get right to it. Max, we've worked together for a number of years, and I know I've seen you at a bunch of conferences, and I think we ran into each other at reInvent a couple of years. But I know you've been working on a lot of really cool stuff. Before we get into the conversation, would you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, happily. So I've been at MongoDB for a bit more than 2 years. And when I started, I was working only on Compass. And then because we were looking at how we can make developers more productive with MongoDB, Compass was not the only tool that we wanted to provide. And therefore, we looked at the other options like VS Code that we'll be talking about in a little bit. And then my team is also working on the new MongoDB Shell, all with the idea of making developers more productive. And this is something that I really enjoy. This is something that I really care about. And so I'm super happy to be at MongoDB and work on this kind of problems and on the developer experience.
Fantastic. Now, that's not a Texas accent that I hear. Where are you from, Max?
I'm Italian.
Okay.
I lived in Florida for a while, actually.
Okay.
But yeah, then I moved to Germany. So.
And where are you? You're in Germany today?
Yeah, I'm in Berlin.
Okay, so it's getting late for you. Awesome. Joe, welcome. Good to have you on the show once again. I think everybody knows Joe Karlsson, but go ahead and introduce yourself.
No. I was last on in the GraphQL episode, if anyone remembers that one. It's my personal favorite, but I'm biased.
Absolutely.
But yeah, developer advocate, MongoDB, and just excited to be here.
Super. Awesome. All right. Well, your hosts, as usual, Nic Raboy and myself. Nic, go ahead and let people know who you are.
Oh, the spiel again. All right. Yes. So I get the pleasure of working with all of these amazing guys. And I am the co-host of this podcast with Mike Lynn.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks, guys. And I guess we'll jump right into it. Text editors and development environments, IDEs. I guess I'll show my age. I started working pre VI, but eventually got
pre-text editor.
Pre-text editor, yeah. I was working in an environment called Pick. So I was developing applications using Pick Basic, and there was a built-in editor that was basically a stream editor, a lot like Edlin used to be, which was super frustrating to work with, but quickly moved into VI, and man, it really improved my efficiency when I started developing. So I think that's the key here. Leveraging tools that increase your efficiency, and IDEs are certainly so powerful in that space. Max, what IDE are you leveraging today?
So I don't do a lot of coding myself. I'm a product manager, but I still do some. And my VS Code is my tool of choice. Although I still use VI for commit messages, and sometimes I have to do some Java, so I go with JetBrains products. But my favorite editors right now is VS Code.
Outstanding.
So are you guys all using just straight VI, or are you using Vim?
Vim, actually.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think
All
everybody's using Vim these days. It's just called VI. I don't know.
All right.
But so Joe, what do you use when you're getting into code? What do you jump into first? What's your tool of choice?
Today it's Visual Studio Code. Like, I think that's pretty much everyone. Well, most people are using it. But yeah, I think I started in Sublime, Atom, and then now I'm a diehard VS Code guy. Yeah. And Mike, when you're saying you were like pre-text editor, I thought you were talking like punch cards. I thought we were going pre-GUIs.
How dare you? I think I actually did take a course in COBOL when I was first learning what programming was, and in the class we actually leveraged punch cards. So
that's pretty cool, though. Actually, I've never used those. Those sound even harder. Do you have IntelliJ with the punch cards, or
no? There's no code suggestion either.
Okay, that's good to know.
So my story is from punch cards to VS Code. That's where I spend most of my time today, in VS Code. But
that's a good tech talk name. I think you could do that.
How did everyone not quit back then?
And we had to walk uphill in the snow both ways.
Both ways, absolutely. Yeah. No, we've come a long ways in text editors, even the last couple of years. Like looking at the Stack Overflow's like developer reports, even in 2015, Notepad++ was the biggest text editor that year, right?
from one of the viewers. There are no. I will confirm that.
No ESLint errors on punch cards. That's absolutely true.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
But regular errors, you will get those.
Absolutely.
No, we've come a long ways though.
Right on. Yeah. It has been quite a journey. And so in terms of like, linting is one feature obviously built that you get built right into VS Code today and other IDEs. But what other capabilities that you get from modern IDEs do you find really like indispensable that you would find it a hard time going back to just a straight text editor? And I'll throw it to you, Joe. Go ahead.
Oh, like when would I use just like a Notepad or a VI or something?
Yeah.
Actually, I use this a lot for. I use Nano all the time on my Raspberry Pi, just for like easy to pop in. I mean, that's the benefit of having those. They're super lightweight. They're terminal based, and they're going to be on every Unix-based machine ever, right? So super extensible. I will try to avoid it if all possible. Actually, so Visual Studio Code has this new SSH remote workspace feature, which has been I don't have to do Nano and VI anymore. I just SSH in. I can do all my editing straight in there. That's been a total game changer for me.
Wait a minute. You edit directly in production?
Yes. If it's my Raspberry Pi that's sitting in my bedroom, I will do that. Absolutely. Yeah. I don't have a staging Pi environment yet, but maybe next year.
So that's great. I love SSH built right into my IDE. That's a game changer. Now, there are other environments that we're probably not going to touch too much on today. Like I spend a good bit of time in Xcode, which I absolutely love. When I'm writing Swift, it's amazing. And the things that I really like about Xcode,
How
code
slow it is to start up. I'm going to start a flame war. We're going to.
It's worth it though. I really do enjoy the environment. I like the code suggestions. I like the built-in linting and I don't know. It just makes it, for me anyway, it makes it a whole lot easier to learn. I think I'm relatively new to Swift, and VS Code has these very same things built into it. I know Sublime had a fantastic array of extensions. I think I did along my way to VS Code. I spent some time in Sublime, but it's things like that. So I guess what I'd like to eventually get to is talking about the MongoDB extension for VS Code and how that came to be. And really, what's the journey been like, Max?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, a couple of years ago, the only real developer tool that we had with a UI was Compass, and Compass is great because like you can use it to explore your data, to run your queries, test your queries, and all of that. But the real situation is that developers spend the majority of their time inside their code editor, inside their IDE. And we didn't really want them to jump from one place to another, one window to another. You already have your IDE, your browser, you're like testing your website, and it's a bit annoying that you have to switch between one place and another. And so we were trying to find a way for them to be more productive inside the environment where they already were. And so we did a bit of user research, a bit of market research. We looked at what developer environment were more popular, and with the learnings from that research, we basically found that, well, first of all, VS Code already 3 years ago was the most popular IDE, or a code editor. It's technically not an IDE, I guess, but a code editor. And back then, it was already used by, I think, more than 40% of the developers, according to the Stack Overflow developer survey. And then a year later, it was like more than 50%. So there was a clear opportunity to be where the developers are by providing an extension for VS Code, and to make their life easier as they were working with an application built on top of MongoDB. And we evaluated other options. We evaluated the JetBrains suite as another potential target, but we saw that VS Code was really growing not only just as an editor but as a platform, as a way to work with not just your application code but your database, your cloud environment, and we thought that would be a good place to insert some MongoDB functionality, so developers would have it there right away without going somewhere else, without necessarily having to switch window and go to Compass every time they needed to just take a look at the data or look at the schema of their collections. And that's why we started designing the extension and building it.
I just want to say, I think you brought up something I think is key to what makes Visual Studio Code so cool. It's like it's more than an editor, it's a platform, right? And I think its success has been based on its extensibility through plugins, right?
I think that's definitely one aspect of it. I think when it just started, it didn't have so many extensions. It was very similar to Atom. It was just faster. And so gradually developers migrated from one to another because they had an environment that was the same as the one they were used to, but faster. And then it started growing as a platform. And you'd be, as a Python developer, you'd find a Python extension that would help you work faster with Python. As a Go developer, you'd find something that would provide you great autocomplete and great tools for Go. And so you'd start using VS Code. JavaScript and TypeScript obviously benefited a lot from the work that was done in core VS Code plus extensions. And I think that's why popularity grew very quickly.
So I want to ask if you could just maybe get a little bit closer to the microphone. I think you're a little low. Yeah.
How about now?
That sounds much better. Thank you. It's great. So when looking at the editor landscape, you chose VS Code because of the numbers. I think that the numbers speak for themselves. We did a little bit of market testing prior to going live with this stream today. We did a Twitter poll, and I think at last I checked, there were something like 1,200 responses, 1,200 votes, and the poll was quite simple, basically proposing which code editing environment people are using. And an overwhelming majority, I think 77% of the respondents selected VS Code. So, I mean, it's clear that VS Code is way out in front. Why do you think that is? I mean, I'm interested in you guys, your thoughts on why VS Code is so popular.
I honestly am not too sure. So I used to come from Atom. I used to use that very aggressively. I think that VS Code, I think I switched to VS Code because the extensions were more reliable in a sense that there was more, they were heavily supported, there was less problems. But maybe if I had to guess, some of the popularity is behind, since it's a Microsoft product, it's got a very well-known brand behind it. Joe, what are your thoughts?
I have so many thoughts. I'm going to try to keep it small. But so I was thinking, Mike, you brought up an excellent point, though, about using Visual Studio Code. A lot of times our IDEs of choice are the ones that work best with the programming tools. And I think Xcode works great if you're developing iOS apps, right? And it's a no-brainer. You have to use that, right? But I think Visual Studio Code is great for web development, and it's also super beginner friendly. And I think MongoDB as a database is a really great database if you're just getting into development, right? Because it's easier to use than anyone else's. which I think is what makes it a natural choice for these developers. I did want to say one other thing too that I think no one's brought up about Visual Studio Code is that it's actually, I feel like it's transcending text editors as like an application. Like we're seeing it integrated in so many different places, like GitHub's new code spaces. You can start editing it online, right? There's like it's going on beyond what we consider an IDE and like moving into new places that they've never been before.
That's exciting, and it's leaving the app window, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
And Max, there are some other things that you're working on in that space. You want to talk a little bit about MongoDB? I assumed you were working on some of these things, MongoDB Shell and some of those. Do they fall into your area of responsibility?
Yeah, they do. So I'm the product manager for developer tools, and that includes Compass, MongoDB for VS Code, and the new MongoDB Shell, MongoSH.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really interesting is that we were kind of looking at this as three different products, but then as we were building the new MongoDB Shell, and one of the big requirements of the shell was that we could embed it into other places, then it became kind of the engine between the playgrounds in VS Code, and it's embedded in Compass now. So now there's this MongoDB aware component behind these great UI tools, and we can use it for everything. Plus, you can use it in your terminal, and we try to build like a user experience that is great no matter what environment you're in. If it's the terminal, then fine, you use the shell, you have syntax highlighting, you have autocomplete, and all this interesting stuff that makes you more productive. If you are in Compass, well, you have a GUI to explore your data, but like it's one click to just bring up the shell and use it there. And if it's VS Code, the workflow is very much IDE or editor centered, but you're still interacting with MongoDB in a way that is very similar to how you'd interact with it if you were in the shell, for example.
Yeah. Before we get Before we get to the question, sorry, I just want to explain. There may be some people tuning into the stream that don't know what Compass is. What is Compass, Max? So
Compass is the GUI for MongoDB. It's a visual tool. It's almost, I wouldn't call it an IDE. I think IDE is kind of this word that comes with a lot of baggage, I guess. But it's a GUI that very simply allows you to connect to a MongoDB cluster, server, Atlas cluster, wherever, and it gives you a visual way to navigate and explore your data. It gives you capabilities to explore your schema and figure out if there are outliers, if it has the shape it should have, and another feature that Compass has that a lot of users use and enjoy is the aggregation pipeline builder. So for those of you who are not familiar with like the full extent of MongoDB query language, so you can write your queries, you can do a find query, and you write regular MQL, and that gets you to your data. But MongoDB also has an aggregation framework, which is very powerful and allows you to query your data. You match your data with the filters that you are interested in. But then also you can do projections, you can group, you can really start with your collection and end with something that looks completely different and contains the insights that you were looking for inside the data. And Compass with a visual aggregation builder helps you like break down your aggregation stage by stage. It gives you real-time previews of the results. And then when you're done with it, you can just take it and export it into code and just copy paste it inside your application, whether it's Python, Node.js, or Java. And then you can go the other way as well. So if your aggregation is broken, you just copy it from your code editor into Compass, you debug it, you find the problem, and then you copy paste it back. And I guess that with Visual Studio Code, we want something like something in between, like proper GUI to work with your data, and like an editor where you need to just know the language by heart. We want to help you and do it inside the place where you already are and where you're typing your application code.
Meet the developers where they are. That's awesome.
Exactly.
We have a question coming in from Ayush. Is the Visual Studio Code plugin open source to contribute to?
Yes, it is. It's licensed under Apache 2, and we welcome contributions.
And maybe at some point we could put the the GitHub URL. I think it's under MongoDB-JS, right?
Yeah, Joe just shared it in the.
We will do that. I would love to see this thing. You up for doing a little demo, Max?
Yeah, I am.
All right. While you do that, I'm going to add the banner, give folks info on where they can contribute if they want to. There we go. And there we go. We'll add your screen. So for those listening in, Max is going to do a brief demo. We'll try to be as descriptive as possible. He's got his editing environment open. He's opened VS Code, and he's showing that he's already loaded the VS Code extension for MongoDB. Go ahead, Max.
Yeah. So the extension is installed on my VS Code. There's a little leaf here in your sidebar, and when you click on it, you activate the extension, and you have here a very long list of connections in my case, because I work with many clusters, with several products. I test our products across different environments, and therefore I have a long list of connections here. But essentially, if this were empty, there would be a button that tells you add a new connection. And
so Max,
yep.
Inside of your list, I'm seeing some emojis in there. Are those emojis that you've added as far as naming goes? Or
Yes.
do those have a special meaning?
No, so they have a special meaning for me because they help me recognize connections very easily in the list. But yes, I can rename a connection. And in this case, I put a unicorn emoji to know that that's my demo cluster.
So the Docker Mongo it's just a coincidence that there's a whale on there then, right?
It's not a coincidence, no.
All right.
To know that when yeah. But yeah, I love emojis. They are very visual and they help me recognize stuff.
It's great that it supports that. So now you're open with the editor. You've supplied connection details to the MongoDB cluster, and that can be in any environment. It doesn't have to be in MongoDB Atlas, correct?
Correct. Yes. So I can connect with a connection string, for example, and I can paste anything here. It can be like MongoDB localhost, and I would connect to it. It could be your on-premise MongoDB or the connection string that you copy paste from Atlas, and wherever MongoDB is, you can connect to it.
Now, what about security? Can you obfuscate the password or store that in an environment variable somewhere, or does that need to be stored in the VS Code configuration?
So the password, so when you copy paste the connection string, you will see the password, but then it will be stored securely in your keychain. Okay. So you will never see the password. Well, that's not right. Actually, I can copy this connection string and use it in some other applications, and that will have the password. But the password is securely stored in the keychain, and there is no way for other applications to access it.
Okay, great.
So now I connect to a cluster, and it works the way you would expect. So I have a list of databases. I can pick any of these. This is the sample data that you get in Atlas when you load a sample cluster. And for each collection, we show a sample of the documents here. I can open them and also see the content of a document. And what's also very interesting here, I think, in the tree view of VS Code is that we show the schema and the indexes. And those are very convenient when you are building an application. You have to create a query, and you're trying to figure out what data you can query, what type each of the fields are. And you have it right here in the tree view, and you can even copy the field name if you are trying to build a query inside your Node.js or your Go application, for example.
Wow. So I just want to describe this for the folks that are just listening in. So he's still in VS Code, and in the editor layout, when you use VS Code, you typically have your File Explorer window on the left, upper left, and you can navigate through directories, ultimately targeting a file that you want to edit. VS Code extension for MongoDB does exactly the same thing. So he's still navigating through a File Explorer type view of starting with databases and expanding those and showing the individual collections underneath those. And now that you've got a document displayed in the main portion of VS Code, what can you do there? Can you edit?
Not yet, but this is coming soon. So yeah, I don't want to spoil exactly how it will work, but we started with something simpler. where we implemented the basic capabilities to navigate and explore your data, and then we added playgrounds. I'll show them in a little bit to essentially do any operation that you can do in MongoDB, but you have to type it manually. And then the next step is to really enable the full CRUD capabilities through the UI. So you can select a document or search for a document and then say, okay, I want to edit this. And then you'll be able to edit it, save, and the changes will save the back in MongoDB.
Fantastic. So almost like a, well, I guess it's getting into the space that Compass is in, right?
A little bit, yes. But the flow is more natural for a code editor. So while in Compass you have a very visual representation of the data, you like double click on a field, you select it. You say, okay, now I really want to update this document, update confirmation methods. In VS Code, it's more like editing a file. So you'll open a document and it will be opened in an editor. You will change something in that document. You will do Command S or Control S if you're on Windows, and that document will be saved back into MongoDB.
Wow. And do we have a timeline for when that will be available?
I would say, let's say before Christmas.
Oh, great. Fantastic. What about...
I have a question for you.
Yeah. One real quick. What about schema enforcement? Is that going to be adhered to in the editor?
So that's not supported yet, but it's definitely something we can consider. I think I see that like a lot of people do schema enforcement at the application level. And a lot of people are not even aware that we can enforce schema at the database level, but we can. So you can specify your validation rules in JSON schema and attach those to the collection. And once you've done that, the database will reject inserts or updates that are not in compliance with the schema. And technically, there is a way to configure your validation rules inside VS Code, because as I said, you have playgrounds, which I'll show in a minute. And playgrounds are a shell-like environment in a text editor. So there you could specify your rules in JSON schema, but we don't have a UI way of doing it.
Yeah.
So up on your screen you have this document open, and it's kind of like a file, like you said. Let's say somebody edits this document elsewhere through a driver or through Compass or who knows. Will this document that's currently open update after a period of time, or do you have to go refresh it?
You have to refresh it.
All right.
Great. So did you want to show playgrounds or some other feature?
Just last thing, I wanted to show indexes, because I think like one of the problems that you often encounter in terms of performance with MongoDB is that you add queries to your application and then you say, oh, your application is slow. I don't know what to do about that. And turns out that you forgot that that query was not covered by an index. And so we thought that having indexes here in the tree view, just right next to your application, is very helpful to for you to ensure that you have the right indexes in place when you go and query your data.
Fantastic.
Let me show playgrounds. So playgrounds are there's a cow here. And I'll show that later. So playgrounds are a JavaScript environment where you can run MongoDB shell code, and you can essentially run any shell command here with syntax highlighting, autocomplete, and you can do CRUD operations, you can set validation rules, you can even configure your cluster if you want to, and then you see the results in real time in the output part of VS Code. So, for example, in this playground, I'm selecting a database, I'm dropping a collection, I'm doing an insert many to insert a number of documents, and then I'm doing like a find and an aggregate. Let me delete the aggregate. And now if I run this, this will go to MongoDB, will run all this code as this was a shell, and then it shows the output here. And I can go change my code, run it again, and iterate on the results. And the main reason why we built this is to give you a way to experiment with your queries, with your aggregations, with your data before you go and write the code inside the application. So I can build an aggregation here, stage by stage, find the results I need, and only when I'm satisfied, then I go and copy paste it into my Node.js application, for example.
Fantastic. And this is some of the benefits of having MongoDB have such a tight relationship with JavaScript, right? You can interact with the database using JavaScript commands. How did you open that? I might have missed that, but if I've downloaded and installed the VS Code extension, I want to use the playground as well. How did you get that open?
So the first thing you have to do is to connect to a database, like to a server, to a cluster or something. You can still create a playground, but it won't run if it is not connected to a cluster. And then you open the command palette, which is the typical way you run commands in VS Code. Mm-hmm. And you select create MongoDB playground. And then you type enter, and the default playground file opens. You can also configure it to be empty, so you can start empty every time. But I find myself typically doing like a find or an aggregate, so having already something pre-filled that I can just delete what I don't need is much more convenient.
Oh, that's great. So that what we're looking at now is it says it's using MongoDB VS Code Playground DB, which probably doesn't exist in your environment.
Correct.
And it's dropping it in case it does, and then it's inserting a bunch. So that's a great way to familiarize users of the extension with how it works. I mean, essentially, it's creating a database and a collection from scratch.
Yeah.
Well done.
And we use playgrounds for like a lot of the functionality that is not immediately accessible through the UI, because obviously one thing that you find when you build components for a platform like VS Code is that you have constraints. Like the UI only lets you do certain things, and we had that challenge with this extension. So what we decided to do to tackle this challenge is that for some functionality, we'll just rely on playgrounds. For example, if I want to create an index, VS Code doesn't really have a framework, like a UI framework, where I can like have a wizard and ask the user, okay, select this, click there. So what we did is build a playground that gives you a template for an index, and you can just edit in and out fields, and at the end of it, you run it, and you have the index created.
We had a question up. There we go. Can you set a baseline playground template?
Right now, you cannot, but we welcome that as a feature request.
Where do people go to give you feature requests?
So a lot of users do that through issues on GitHub. We happily accept that. I have to say it's not our favorite way. The best way would be to go to feedback.mongodb.com, select MongoDB for VS Code, and submit your feature request there. The reason for that is that people can vote, and we have a pretty good backend where we can prioritize things based on the activity, the votes, and it really helps us design our roadmap based on like what people feel the extension should have.
Have you gotten many pull requests or feedback items?
Pull requests, I have to say, not so many, but we did get a lot of feedback. And one interesting piece of feedback that we got almost at the very beginning when people started using playgrounds was that they wanted a way to require external code. Like a person said, oh, I use Moment.js every time to format my dates. I would really like to require that. And it turns out that it was relatively straightforward to support. And so now it's possible to require stuff. And that's why basically I had a cow earlier on my screen, because in this playground, I'm requiring the Cowsay node module, and I have a database called Twitter, and there's a little aggregation here. This morning I seeded this collection with the replies to the MongoDB tweet about this Twitch stream. And this basically picks a random document from there and then shows it in the Cowsay kind of way. And you get a cow. And one person said, I use Vim.
Fantastic. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, are there any limitations to the type of JavaScript libraries that you can include right now? Or can you just do any JavaScript NPM module?
I want to say you can do any. So if you go to your like home directory, there's typically a hidden directory called like .vs Code if you're on Mac or Linux, where VS Code stores all its extensions. And if you do npm install there, than any module you can use inside Playgrounds.
I think you might have covered this early on, but was this a Skunkworks project early on?
The extension, you mean?
Yeah.
Not completely, but during Skunkworks last year, Lucas had built a proof of concept for some of the components of this extension, one of them being Playgrounds. And but then we basically so we used that kind of as a technical design, and then we rebuilt it from scratch as we like started becoming serious and making this like a user-facing product.
So you mentioned Lucas. I'm sure you're referring to Lucas Robofsky, who used to be on the developer tools teams. Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Nick, go ahead. You had something?
Yeah, I mean, you're throwing around Skunkworks. It's probably a good idea to mention what exactly that is. For the listeners, and any of you can correct me if I've got the poor explanation of it, but it's a company-wide internal hackathon that we have every year where we work on projects around MongoDB to try to create something cool and maybe even productize it, right?
Right, and that's internal only, right, Nick?
As far as I know, yes, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, you are right. Fantastic project, though. Every year it comes around is exciting. And I think you had something in this year's Skunkworks Bake Off.
Oh,
Nick.
Yeah, I do. So I'll actually be streaming about this on Twitch within a few weeks, but I'm not sure when this episode will air. So we'll have to wiggle it in there.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Max, what's next for the extension? What can we look for in terms of a roadmap?
Right. So as I said earlier, the next thing you're going to see in the extension is document editing. So the first thing that we're going to release probably in the next couple of weeks is so the output of Playgrounds, instead of being down here, we'll move it in an editor tab. So it will have syntax highlighting, it will be easier to select, it will be easier to save. And then from there, we'll add the document editing, which means essentially a couple of things. One, that the documents I select in the tree view here are editable, but also that if I use a Playground to search for like some specific documents in my collection, then I'll be able to say, I want to edit this. And then you'll go in editing mode and you'll be able to update that document directly in MongoDB.
Where does where do the Playgrounds live? That's not stored in the database in any way, right? That's just stored in your local VS Code environment, correct?
So Playgrounds are just files on the file system, which makes them very convenient, I think, because you can share them with your team. And when you start a project, you can have a Playground to seed your database, and anybody who checks out that repository can just run the same Playground, and they will have exactly the same database that you had when you started the project.
So what other features do we need to talk about before we leave the VS Code extension?
I think this was most of it. One other thing that is worth showing is the ability to launch an interactive shell. So when I'm connected to a cluster, I can just say, give me a shell connected to this cluster. And now if there is no demo effect, yeah, I have a shell connected to that cluster. So I can start doing like show DBs and show collections.
So while you're doing that, so what you did was, I think you right-clicked on the file explorer on a collection, or on a connection, on a cluster,
yeah, on a connection,
and you selected
I said, launch MongoDB Shell, and because we know what the connection string for this cluster is, then we can just give it to the shell in the VS Code terminal, and then you get an interactive shell that you can use to work with MongoDB.
And do you need to have anything additionally installed in order to leverage that capability?
Yes, you have to have the shell installed in your path, whether it's the older Mongo shell or the brand new Mongo SH shell. It doesn't make a difference, but it has to be in your path.
Fantastic. Well, this has been a great discussion, great demo. Thank you. What other IDE environments are you going to target for this type of functionality? What's next?
So right now our focus is really on VS Code. We thought that at some point we would have a similar functionality also in JetBrains IDEs, because there is a big community around JetBrains as well. I think, yes, VS Code is definitely the most used code editor, but the JetBrains IDEs I think they are very good and very solid products, and they have a big community. But then we realized that they were building support for MongoDB themselves, and they have a product called DataGrip, which is primarily focused around working with databases. And the MongoDB support is built in there, but then the same support is also in the, I think it's called Database Tools plugin that you can install in all the other commercial IDEs that are part of the JetBrains suite. And what's nice about that is that that comes also with the MongoDB Shell embedded. So the new MongoDB Shell, MongoSH, is open sourced. It's under Apache 2 as well. And JetBrains embedded it inside DataGrip, and they're using it as an interface between the UI and the MongoDB server.
Outstanding. We love those guys. We love JetBrains. Joe, did you have a question?
Oh, kind of. The reason I'm here on the podcast is because I wrote a blog post about it, and I've been using it since it came out, right? I don't know, a couple months ago, right? But I thought it might be interesting to talk about it like from an end user's perspective. Like when would you want to use this or not use it? Or like who would be like a target audience for this? And I just want to say too, like I've been using it for months now, and it's been super helpful. I code primarily in MongoDB. I basically have it open every single time I'm working on an app.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes it super easy to check it out all in one place. Yeah.
Tell us about that article, Joe.
I don't know. If you guys are curious, I wrote a blog post kind of going through it. It's like an opinionated guide to like working through all the features, a lot of the features of this. So basically, the demo he went through today. I would encourage though, if you're using a MongoDB database, you should totally go check this. Just download and check it out and connect it. It will like make your life easier. Let's see here. We'll post the link to the blog post. You should check it out.
Awesome.
I think maybe like one thing that I now remember that you mentioned in your blog post and I forgot to show is more for like DevOps engineers than for developers.
Terraform.
Basically, we have a convenient way to work with Atlas and Terraform. So for those of you who don't know, Atlas, our database as a service, has a Terraform provider, and you can spin up Atlas clusters via Terraform. And we thought it would be nice to have some sort of support for that inside the VS Code extension, because again, we want to make your life easier and we want you to be able to work with MongoDB as effectively as possible. And so now if I say this file is a Terraform file, and what I'm doing is just using a VS Code shortcut to basically change the file type, and now I type Atlas into it, I immediately get a Terraform, I think it's called template, but I might say it wrong, with the basic configuration that you need to spin up a set of Atlas resources with placeholders for all the stuff that you need to fill in. So like you want to give it give the project a name, my project, you want to give a cluster the name, you want it either in AWS, Azure, or GCP, and you want a certain region, a certain size of the instance.
Where are these? This you just blew my mind, Max. So how did you get into this editing session? So imagine somebody's listening in on the audio only podcast. Right.
So VS Code is very powerful and has the concept of snippets. And snippets are not just code that you could copy paste from one place to another. You can define placeholders, and you can define what type of placeholders are in that particular like snippet. And so what I did here was create a new empty Terraform file. I typed Atlas, which is the keyword to invoke that particular snippet, and the extension filled out the document with the basic information that you need to bootstrap an Atlas cluster via Terraform.
Wow, that's incredible. So this is not just visibility into your MongoDB databases and collections. It's actually, like we alluded to earlier, it's building out a platform. So the MongoDB extension for VS Code delivers these snippets as a part of the installation, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Oh, fantastic. And I noticed as you were editing that file, are there templated variables that, how did you get those drop downs to appear that where you were selecting the provider, GCP, AWS, etc.?
Yeah, so when you build an extension that contains snippets, when you define the snippet, you can say for this variable or for this part of the snippet, I want to ask the user for input. And you can say the input is just text, so the placeholder is replaced with the text that the user types. Or you can say the input is one of these three choices, and in that case, AWS, GCP, or Azure. What really VS Code did very well, besides really supporting the community and help them build these extensions, is also make the extension API this powerful, because really almost anything you can think of is part of the API. You are constrained because you are inside an environment that someone else has built, but the entire framework is extremely powerful.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. Incredible. So are there any other hidden gems like the Terraform editing capabilities?
Yeah, I guess so. Like in the sense that, as I mentioned earlier, playgrounds also include autocomplete. And there are two types of autocomplete. One is I autocomplete collection names, for example. Now it takes a while because it's the first time that I do it. But it completes commands and collection names. But there is also another type of autocomplete. So now if I say aggregate, and I'm typing an aggregation, by the way, for those of you who are just listening. And then I say, okay, the first stage of an aggregation is a match, because all good aggregation starts with a match. Now I say $match, and we have a keyword, so we could recognize the keyword $match, and we suggest the template. And we use exactly the same templates that we use in Compass. So they have comments. They tell you, oh, this variable is supposed to be that. This placeholder is supposed to be replaced by that. And with match, almost anybody can write a match query because it's basically the same syntax as a find. But when you start doing things that are a bit more complex, like for example, $8 lookup, for example, then you have comments that tell you, oh, from is the target collection, local field is the local join field, foreign field is the target join field. And all of this helps you saving keystrokes, but also writing the correct syntax, which is something that sometimes you struggle with when the grammar is so extensive.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Now, you're in a playground. You've opened a playground, and it's doing autocomplete in that playground. Do you add anything to the base functionality for, let's say, the JavaScript syntax portfolio?
Yes. So what we do is, so we add MongoDB keywords, but also when the cluster is connected to and the extension starts loading databases and collection, then we seed the autocompleter list with the list of databases and collections. So when I start db dot, the autocompleter knows that there can either be a function, and then we have the list of all the possible MongoDB function, or there could be a collection name. And therefore, it provides collection names from all the collections that are available in that particular database that you've selected above.
Wow. So it connects to the database, caches the list of collections, and stores those in a way that you can leverage throughout your editing experience. Fantastic job. Joe, Nick, anything else before we start to wrap?
Nothing from me, Mike.
Yeah,
it was
fantastic.
I just want to say, I think it's great. I love it. I had this idea to build this for Skunkworks last year, and I got slapped because they said that you guys were building this. So this is there's a total huge need for that. I think it's amazing. Yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes. I think and I want everyone to keep in mind, this is it just got launched. This is fairly new product. This is the beginning, right? We're still working on this thing.
So the majority
continue to give us feedback.
We built, I guess, in the first 4 months, and then we launched, and then we launched and it became a real thing. We started getting feedback, and we started adding functionality, and let's see where it goes. I think the more we start sort of completing the basic functionality to work with MongoDB, the more we start looking into how this extension could be helpful when you work specifically with Atlas and the services that only exist in Atlas. And so I think there will be the extension will be more tied also to the cloud functionality that is part of our data platform.
Well, terrific. Max, thanks so much for spending some time with us. Before we go, Joe, you want to tell people where they can find you?
Best way to get a hold of me is on Twitter at Joe Karlsson1. See you there.
All right. And Max, how do people get a hold of you?
Same at M Marcon on Twitter. And feedback about the extension, I'll happily get through GitHub or through feedback.mongodb.com.
And Nick, anything from you before we close out?
Yeah. So this is an episode that'll appear on the podcast. If you've never heard the podcast before, the link is mongodb.com/podcast, and we have a lot of very informative episodes just like this. So if you're in your car, going somewhere, working out, you need something to listen to, well, perfect time to educate yourself on some of the cool things on MongoDB.
Fantastic. And we love feedback on the podcast. We love reviews. If you happen to take the time to click the like button or find the review capability on Apple, for example, we would love to hear from you. Not only what you thought of this episode, but what do you think of the podcast in general, and maybe even suggestions about what we should cover in the future. Would love to hear from you either in the review space or you can visit us in the community. If you head on over to community.mongodb.com. I know that all four of us spend time in there. So if you wanted to ask a question about the VS Code extension, about the podcast, about anything, we'd be happy to interact with you there. So once again, community.mongodb.com. I want to thank both Max and Joe for visiting us on the podcast, and
Thank you.
We'll have to have you back.
You
Thanks.
have to. It's a rule. You have to have us back.
Awesome. All right. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. Have a question or a suggestion for the show? Visit us in the MongoDB community forums at community.mongodb.com.